in the Middle East, we see that the price of petroleum products is hiking already, topping up all over Africa. We see that when petroleum prices go up, definitely there is a ripple effect. It reverberates to transportation cost hikes. And once transportation cost hikes, then it goes to all the commodities because people have to move their goods here and there. And then transporters having the prices of petroleum goods coming up, especially gas, will have to also raise their prices.
My name is Grace Komalafe. Our topic today is Middle East conflict, how US, Israel, and Iran tensions affect Africans. And to have this conversation, I did mention before we went on that break that we have a guest, and he's joining us from Liberia this morning, and that's Bishop Dr. Abraham Johannes Williams, a prolific writer, journalist, and of course, he's got deep insight into governance, society, and cross-border African realities. Good morning, Doctor. So pleased to have you join us on Across Borders again.
Okay, good morning, Grace. I'm very pleased to join with you again this time and across borders from Liberia.
Yes, thank you so much. How is Liberia this morning?
Well, Liberia is here and buzzing. Well, of course, you know that tomorrow is likely the day of Ramadan. So everybody is moving up and down, especially the Muslims trying to get themselves prepared for tomorrow. But, well, as we get into the program, we will get to know how Liberia is doing in terms
All
of
right.
what's
Thank you
happening
so
in the middle.
much. Yes, and I want to seize this medium to say happy Ramadan to all of our Muslim faithful brothers and sisters all over the world. So let's begin by looking at some critical areas, though we may not be able to exhaust all of them due to time, but we'll do what we can. So, Doctor, it's no longer news that there is an ongoing conflict between US, Israel, and Iran. From your perspective, how are Africans, interpreting these tensions between the two parties? Is it seen as a distant geopolitics or something that is already affecting our daily lives?
Thank you very much, Grace. I think this particular conflict in the Middle East, especially between Iran and America and Israel, is affecting the whole world, and Africa is not exclusive. But maybe let me start with a little bit of preliminary introduction of what has informed this way. We see that the Middle East is a very critical area. Right from biblical days, and history is kind of revolving around that area. And from the biblical perspective, prophetic perspective, and maybe geopolitical perspective, you will see that the Middle East is very critical to the peace, the safety, and even the economy of the world. So looking at how the conflict between Iran and Israel, and of course US in addendum, is having a serious impact currently. Well, Africa has not positioned itself economically in a way where shocks like this will be able to be contained and controlled. By that I mean the economy of Africa depends mostly on outsiders, the West, and also the Middle East, that basically supplies most of our petroleum products. So we see that with the particular conflict going on now in the Middle East, we see that the price of petroleum products is hiking already, topping up all over Africa. We see that when petroleum prices go up, definitely there is a ripple effect. It reverberates to transportation cost hikes. And once transportation cost hikes, then it goes to all the commodities because people have to move their goods here and there. And then transporters having the prices of petroleum goods coming up, especially gas, will have to also raise their prices. So it's telling already here in Liberia, it's telling the north.
Okay.
Prices of petroleum goods are up and transportation costs is up here
Okay.
in Liberia, also in neighboring Sierra Leone, in Guinea, and I think across the board in Africa.
All right. Good. So it's okay that you've actually taken us to the key impact that we are experiencing now, but I want us to talk about it much later. I would like you to address a particular concern. But of course, I want to ask, to what extent does this situation expose Africa's structural dependence on global trade and supply system? Because if the voice, I mean, the crisis is far away from Africa, and yet we are feeling it this much. To what extent would you say it has exposed, Africa's structural dependence on global trade and supply?
Yeah, Africa, um, I would say, has suffered a reverberation of the transatlantic slave trade and the trans-Saharan slave trade that dehumanized Africa and Africans for about 400 to 500 years. And as a result of that kind of torture, mental torture, subjugation, is that Africans were made to feel subhuman to Westerners and other races. And as such, you will see that even when the slave trade receded, and then you had the colonialism that came on, which I consider as slave trade legitimized, so that Africans consider themselves as subhuman, as if they were not equal to the whites, they were not equal to the Britons, they were not equal to the Australians, they were not equal to the Americans, they were not equal to the Germans and all the white race, basically. So you find out that that mentality has made us to be subjugated to the point that when colonialism came in, there was massive exploitation of Africa. And African leaders should pretend and overreach because they saw themselves as stooges, as puppets of the West. As we were coming out of colonialism, we realized that our African leaders could not really stand up onto nationalizing our economies. And so there was massive exploitation of African economies, our natural resources, our mineral resources. And as such, we found out that we were not able to stand on our feet. We became slaves economically. And once you are not able to fend for yourself, once you are not able to raise up your own funds and implement your own projects on your own, those who help you to implement that, those who help you to be able to move on and make your projects to actualization, you depend on them. And that's been our problem from, of course, the slave trade and, of course, especially in the colonial period. Now we're in the new colonial period and it's economic slavery. So we depend on the West mostly. And of course, now we also depend on the Middle East for our inflow of petroleum products, which we depend on mostly to be able to move on all over the place. So we see that Africa has had that dependency syndrome. We cannot do without that. Africa does not have refineries, for example. You will see that Nigeria has been trying, grappling so much to have a refinery. The late Muhammad Buhari, peace be to his ashes, tried so much to be able to work on and overhaul and be able to get the Nigerian refineries, on course. It did not work. Dangote is working on his own. Up to now, it's ongoing. So we see that we don't have viable refineries in Africa. And as such, we depend on refineries of our petroleum products in the West, in the Middle East. And so, problems that are facing the Middle East are having a ripple reverberation very directly upon the African economy. Prices are going up as a result of that. So I would think, Grace, that Africa needs to recalibrate in terms of, especially the petroleum products, having intra-African investments in the area of petroleum products, petroleum infrastructure. We should have, for example, refineries in Nigeria. We should have refineries in South Africa. We should have refineries in North Africa. We should have refineries in all the regions of Africa, at least one, so that as issues like this take place in the globe, which we are not really participating in, which we have not caused anything to let it happen. It is a geopolitical, it's an economic and geopolitical dominance issue, with the West, with also those in the Middle East, with Iran, I would say especially, trying to find its way in the nuclear age, for example. So we see that Africa is so dependent upon the West and the economies of the Middle East to be able to survive. It makes us to begin to introspect.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your thought. I think all of these that you've been able to put together, we can relate that to the dominance that is out there, that is much talk about. I think we're also going to get to that as well. Now you've talked about the oil, the petrol, and all of that. Thank God for Dangote and thank God for Nigeria and every other African countries who believe that we'll continue to strive and someday we'll get there. But there's been a lot of focus on the Strait of Hormuz. And I see some Nigerians say, oh, we'll produce oil. Why is Dangote increasing price? Is oil price, is it priced globally? And all kind of questions. So can you explain why this location is so critical and how tensions there end up affecting fuel prices across the globe?
Yes, we will see that among all the countries, there's the OPEC countries, those oil producing countries in the world, we see that the Middle East have positioned themselves, okay? Whether it's Iran, whether it's Saudi Arabia, they have positioned themselves in such a way that they've had huge oil refineries and infrastructure in their places. So as they drill oil, we find out that they have the wisdom to be self-reliant, and so they have developed very massive infrastructures there. The Strait of Hormuz is a very, very critical one because that's where if you like, the global route of exit into the world takes place. So from the Strait of Hormuz, the oil now begins to distribute, even in the Middle East, distribute in the West, distribute to Africa, and those kinds of things are happening. And so, when the Strait of Hormuz is in context, there is a serious problem. The Iranian authorities are using this advantage that is there to be able to strangulate Israel and America, because everywhere in the world will depend on energy, the petroleum energy, to be able to move around and also to be able to power our nuclear plants and projects. And so Iran has been able to see its geopolitical, position and location as an advantage they can exploit in this particular war. War is something that is unpredictable. You will start it, you don't know where it's going to end. And everybody begins to look at what are the areas that they can hold on to as an advantage to outwit the enemies or the adversaries. And because the Strait of Hormuz is extending right from Iran, you will see into the waters. So the Iranian authorities, especially the regime that is there, see that now we can use this one effectively to our advantage. And so they are trying to protect that Strait of Hormuz and buy it from their enemies and adversaries. But lately, they have been trying to compromise a little bit to say, okay, we can allow vessels to move and come and go and get petroleum products, the gas, fuel, basically. But it can only happen with the Chinese yuan. Look, let me tell you, this conflict is not only an economical conflict, it is a geopolitical conflict. China has moved in because they want to now come in and present their dominance to America, which has been like the lone country trying to police the whole world and trying to make sure that the whole system, of the world is tailored in by them, is dictated by them, more or less. And so China is trying to come in and be able to remove the dollarization of petrol, the dollarization of gas. So once that one happens, it means that the economy of the US is going to plummet. And that is a very critical situation. The world is now multipolar, and the US is trying to maintain dominance. And China sees this as an advantage and as a critical opportunity to enter in. Of course, Russia and North Korea are also backing them up as a league, the BRICS league. So it's a very critical issue. I wouldn't want to delve into the, how will I call it now? Into the prophetic and religious civilization matter, because that is a very critical thing. When we begin to discuss that, we will let things spiral out of control.
Okay. So, I like the fact that you mentioned that when you start something, I mean, this time around, it doesn't really have to be war. Whatever you start, I mean, most times you just want to start, you look at it from a different angle that this is where it's going to end. But in most cases, it doesn't end the way you see it. Do you understand? And you have mentioned that, yes, you start a war and you don't know how it's going to end. And of course, a lot of things have been happening. And you have mentioned, China trying to come in and all of that. Do you think that the U.S. will, give in just like that, especially when it comes to the superpower thing that is, all over, and the dominance? The U.S. is seen as, the superpower, the most powerful, and all of that. Do you think at any point, with the way the situation is now, U.S. is going to back
out? It's a very unfortunate situation. U.S., I would say the President of the United States of America, really miscalculated this whole situation. They felt like Iran was just like maybe Venezuela and some other countries. But Iran is actually proven to be a very, very formidable actor in this matter. So the President of America did not think through very seriously. He thought this particular conflict was going to come and go very easily because they will show their dominance. And I tell you, the US is not going to just back off like that because they are a superpower, the world superpower. Let's say they pride themselves as being the best economy in the world, having the best military infrastructure, air power, and so on and so forth. So they are not going to back out like that. So as a result of that, we should pray that the conflict does not escalate. It doesn't go into a month or two. Because as it continues, you will see the reverberations going into the Middle East, the attacks, of the U.S. bases in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, and all the places. So you will see that with that happening, the Middle East will have like a serious tension going on, whereby those are the countries where Iran is now bombing into their infrastructure, their refineries, bombing into several other areas, and even civilian population may want to see themselves as being attacked by Iran. And look, Saudi Arabia right now is seeing the war as it really looks like. Something they had been envisaging and advocating for, a war against Iran to stop them from developing nuclear warheads and so forth. At this point, you will see that they are seeing the reverberation effect on them, the impact on them, even though they have not declared themselves as part of the war. And so they are restraining themselves for something they had actually envisaged and actually advocated for. That's what happens. Sometimes you advocate for something, but you don't know the ramifications of it and the impact until they come to your doorstep. They just began to see. And now they are like backing up and restraining themselves. United States of America is the greatest superpower in the world. Do you think they will allow Iran to kind of dominate them and disgrace them, if you like, in this particular war? Look, let's say, if Iran shows themselves very strongly as they are doing currently, and they go beyond this point, I think a nuclear war may have to arise because the United States of America and India will not allow Iran to subdue them in this way. And just know that it's not only Iran now. Iran has some allies. Russia, North Korea, China are with them, and others may be coming on board. And so, if this one spirals out of control, then a third world war is triggered unnecessarily over some petty things that could be, discussed diplomatically and tried to handle.
Okay, Doctor, thank you so much for your insight so far. While you were talking, I had a couple of things coming to my head because we've seen a couple of videos, we've read, stories and all of that. So, but I don't want us to go there because I know there are bigger issues within, the US itself because of this war. But we're just going to move away from that and get to some other questions. Now, the effect, the impact is huge. Everybody is feeling it. Let's come to media. From media standpoint, how well are African media platforms reframing and explaining this crisis to the public? How well are they reframing, and explaining this crisis to the public? At least, people's mental stability and all of that is important. What's your take?
That's a very important question. It's very unfortunate that our media outlets, most of it in Africa, are reactionary, not preemptive, So when this war was preempted and was being talked about, when the first peace talks kind of fell out, and we saw what happened, and then Donald Trump now gave the warning shot that they were going to engage Iran very seriously and decisively. I think the African media across the board should have begun to sensitize the public that look, what we are looking at, the Iran Israel conflict, and with years back in Israel, is something that will be far reaching beyond what we can envisage. They should have been preparing the public, the government media, the ministries of information all across the African continent, because we know that Africa is so dependent on these other economies and these other infrastructures in those countries where the wars are going to take place. Then it means that we will have a ripple effect for something that we are not prepared for something that we have had nothing to do to escalate, that we have anything to do to even cause, for example. African media was supposed to have been very proactive and preemptive, and that did not really happen. I don't know what happened in Nigeria, but for most part of the African continent that I have been researching, we've not had any public awareness and sensitization of the people, so they know that look, hey, something is happening in the Middle East, and this one is going to have geopolitical and economic reverberation, especially, first of all, looking at the economic reverberation. Now, the geopolitical issues have not yet come up because the war has not become full-blown. When they do, God forbid, it will have effect on us, like in the first and especially the Second World War. But now, the economic effect for something that you have no part to play in. Now, all of a sudden, in a week, in 2 weeks, you see that the prices of petroleum products are hiking, and the prices of transportation costs are hiking in your countries. Without your control, you have nothing to do about that because you do not have refineries. Just imagine, Africa is so dependent that even though we have oil-producing countries, like Nigeria is an oil-producing country, Libya is an oil-producing country. We see that even in Liberia and Sierra Leone, I remember that since I was in elementary school, I am 61 years old now. Since I was in elementary school, they have been exploring oil in Sierra Leone. And in Liberia, they've been doing it for ages, likewise. But up until now, they're still exploring. Just exploiting, the oil reserves that are in the country and carrying them out in the name of exploration. So you will see that we did not engage the public, we did not engage the populace, we did not engage the people to know that this war that is taking place far away from us has economic impact on us, apart from the political and also the geopolitics of it. When it escalates, we are supposed to have engaged the people. Our media, especially, we are supposed to engage the people to prepare them. But
I see.
It's not happening, and even our politicians are not doing that one because most of our politicians are there mostly to make money for themselves.
Okay, thank you so much, Bishop Dr. Williams. Well, we'll still talk about this reporting, but I want us to look at it from a different perspective again. Yes, earlier I mentioned about mental stability. There's some sort of information that some individuals would see and they will feel like, oh, what is this? But again, I want to ask, and I'm going to take you away a bit from Africa this time. Let me take you away from Africa. Now, like Israel, on the street of social media, I get to hear that, Israel is not giving out the exact information, maybe for some set of laws or rules, they give out just a bit, they cover up some. Now, when it comes to a journalist underreporting a situation, what impact does this have on the people, either far or near? And of course, again, how about exaggerated reporting? Because when you go to social media, you're just picking up stuffs. You know that some are exaggerated, some are just put together, AI made, and all of that. And of course, we have some that are so real. So in this case, what impact would you say it is having on the people? Either it's underreported or exaggerated.
Yeah, well, you see, in Africa and most parts of the world, I have come to realize that both politics and war are run by propaganda. And as such, you will see that the two countries that are basically involved, Iran and Israel, have media that are very, very restricted. So you will see that the journalists maybe are not to blame in this particular instance. I would like to exonerate them, if you like, even though they may have to pry in. They may have friends, in the countries that are there who will be able to give them some specific information, whose identities will not have to be disclosed, because of their safety. But I will think that journalists will not be blamed very much because the two countries are restricted completely in terms of divulging information. But the underreporting of what is happening in Iran and also what is happening in Israel is giving us a whole lot of confusion because, like you said, you have people that are normally taking sides. Those that are taking sides because of religious affiliation, those that are taking sides because of geopolitical affiliation, are either under reporting or over reporting, exaggerating things or underestimating what is happening in both of the countries and those that are involved in the area. So you will see that it's causing a lot of confusion. And with all this AI information coming on, you see that you just don't know what is happening. Because you have certain sites that are very, very authentic and they report information that is real, information that is not doctored. But at the end of the day, how will you know? How will you know? Some people are so confused, they don't know what is really happening. It's like you are looking at a situation that is very dangerous, very precarious, and it's coming to you, but then you will not be able to have the right information. Because the right information comes, the wrong information comes, the right one comes, and the wrong one comes. At the end of the day, you're confused over which one is right, which one is wrong. That's the predicament that we are in terms of media coverage, I would say.
Okay, thank you so much. We are just going to do maybe one or two more questions before we go on a short break. I think our time is really running fast. I've got a couple of questions. Hopefully, we can take more of them even after the break. So let's do this. Let's talk about Africans in the diaspora. What level of uncertainty or risk do you think they are currently facing, especially in regions closer to the conflict? And I want to add that what's the right thing to do or to be done by the home country? Are African leaders rising to the occasion?
Yeah, you see, the problem we have is that the African infrastructure in terms of certain organizations like the African Union, like the old airports, SADC, the East African arrangements, and all the other ones are not doing justice to Africa as far as I'm concerned. They are not doing justice. They are only basically cruising by, living affluent lives at the expense of the people. Because all of these things are really working in their interest because they send them more donations and so forth. But I would think that it's very important for African leaders to see this thing as a wake-up call. Just like Donald Trump, as he took over, in 2024, began to say, well, we're cutting down aid to Africa. And everybody was very jittery and panicked in Africa because the US aid was, kind of.
Let's look back to history, looking back to the 1979 revolution in Iran, which actually removed a US-backed government. How much of today's tension with the United States is rooted in that historic shift?
Yeah, I think that is very significant. You will see the United States as a world power. They pride themselves as being leaders of the free world. But I have always said, and in my book I presented, how free is the free world? When you say it's free, that means you're giving people the mental leverage, you're giving them the political leverage, you're giving them the ideological leverage. But you will see that it's not the same. It's not like that. Democracy is not something you can impose on others. But America has had that history really of trying to dominate the world by handpicking leaders, so that those leaders in the world, whether it's in Nicaragua, whether it's in Cuba, whether it's in Libya, whether it's in Venezuela, in Vietnam, all of those places where the people want to think independently and to choose for themselves which civilization to actually follow, or whether they can craft their own civilizations. You'll find that the United States have come to impose their leadership, impose their ideology on other civilizations. Of course, granted, I would say that there are certain civilizations that kind of either religiously or politically infiltrate with violence, even oppressing and repressing their own people, which is wrong. But yet still, there is a way of dialoguing and piling some pressure and sanctions and so forth in order to bring them to the negotiating table. But America has had that history of notoriety or trying to handpick leaders for different countries, which they are not part of. They defy the sovereignty of those countries. So you will see that as a result of that, they've made the world very, very insecure. And as a result of all of that, you see that from 1979, since the outset, the American supported regime, they have been behind Iran with sanctions. Just imagine having sanctions for almost like 50 years, if you like, almost. You see that is very restraining. That's very repressive of a particular country, which you are not part of. This is their own country. You can fight pressure to the United Nations. You can fight pressure to the United Nations Security Council and several other global arrangements, so that Iran will see reason to be able to open up, so they can give freedom to people in terms of religious affiliation and religious observance and practice. But that's not the case. So as a result of that, there has been tension since the Islamic regime took over. Unfortunately, they themselves, the Islamic regime, have been so notorious, killing thousands of people. You rule a people. Religion is not something that you can impose on people. God himself does not impose himself on us. If God were to do that, he would have destroyed the world over and over again. Yes, but God doesn't do that. He offers himself as the best option. But whoever wants to follow, you follow. When you don't follow, there are repercussions. There are consequences. But for America, they must superimpose themselves, on people's own civilization. And we should know that Iran has been a world power, long years ago. It's been one of the earliest world powers, the kingdom of Persia, or Medo Persia. So you see that Iran is not a very small political to deal with. Iran is an ancient civilization. For you to be handled that to be able to handle that one, you should have some leverage. You should have negotiations. You should have understanding of where they are at and be able to drive them to the point where they can understand that we need to open up. But that's not the point. That's not the case. And unfortunately, I would say too, their repression of their own citizens who feel that they need to be given the right to choose what religion to follow and how they should lead their lives. It cannot be God. God is God, even those who feel they are following religion very adherently. I'm a bishop. You will realize that they have so much flaws within themselves. So you allow people to live their lives, and eventually they have the consequences. But then guide them through. That's been the flaw of the Iranian system. But America has tried to impose itself, whether it's in Iran, in Libya, and in other places of the world.
Okay, so I know you've actually mentioned a bit talking about the dominance and religion and all of that. And again, you talked about having a dialogue, So for them to be able to come together and say, oh, well, let's have this conversation, let's have this dialogue, it means that both parties are really willing to, let go some certain things. So on this hand, we are looking at the superpower and dominance thing, and on the other hand, we're having the religious thing. So, I mean, it's a whole lot. And, US is that country that people look up to, countries look up to. So it's a whole lot of questions. Some analysts argue that U.S. actions in the Middle East are driven by a desire to maintain dominance and strategic relevance. Others see this, not as dominance, but as a security strategic strategy, particularly around the nuclear concerns and the regional stability. I want to ask, where do you stand? And again, most importantly, I want to add, is it accurate to frame this tension as a form of long-term retaliation or unresolved conflict dating back decades?
Yeah, well, in history, it is said that the immediate causes of conflict may be very flimsy, but the remote causes that have accumulated over the period. And so you will see that in terms of geopolitical, economic dominance, and trying to dominate the whole world, being a world superpower, making the world to be just, maybe I would say bipolar, So it's the US and the West. That's what, basically US wants things to be like. So you will see that because of that, they will be trending in that direction. But you will see that the effects of what to a point where it's very, very difficult, very, very difficult to contain and to be able to control. War is not something that you can contain and control because you don't know what's going to happen next. So, but for me, I will think that this war has different ramifications. And my prayer is that it doesn't cross to the religious ramification. Because when that war happens, it spirals out of control. Because religion is faith-based. And faith drives people, I wouldn't say erratically, but in that kind of direction. People can do anything when it comes to religion because they think that you are actually trampling upon their religious beliefs, their faith, and their worship of the Almighty God and so forth. So when that happens...
Also, sorry, I'm just going to quote you here now. Sorry, I'm going to quote you. I've just been informed that my time is up. So our time is up. I just want you to say in 1 minute, how do we as Africans maintain balance among all of this, conflict? Just in 30 seconds or 1 minute, let's just do this. Thank you so much.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, I said we're wrapping up now. I've just been told my time is up. So I just want you to tell us, how can Africans, most importantly, maintain balance amidst this conflict? Just in 1 minute.
Yeah, well, one thing that Africa needs to do is to basically stay out of the conflict. Because the more people get into the conflict, different regions get into the conflict, and different allies get it, whether it's NATO, it's Africa, you will find out that the war will escalate. So Africa needs to be out of the conflict and be part of trying to rally out around the United States and Israel to de-escalate this particular conflict. That's one. And then Africa needs to now begin to develop their economy within themselves. That is to say, intra-African investment in terms of maybe petroleum infrastructure, nuclear infrastructure, and general investment, so that you don't depend on others out of your region, but you make sure that you be able to harness the resources that you have and begin to trade within yourselves. So even if there is a conflict like the one that is happening now, it does not have much ripple effect on you, because you can still maintain stability in the economy, even though we are a global world. It's a very small world, say, but then you can have stability and peace.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Bishop Dr. Abraham Johannes Williams, for joining us on Across Borders today. And we hope that next time we're going to see you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for the information. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Grace. It's my pleasure being with the Sook. Yes.
Thank you. All right. So that's it. I mean, the message is clear. And I think I'm going to take that last part where he says we need to maintain balance. There's no need to go out there to quarrel, to protest, or to get involved beyond the necessary. I don't think we need that. It is clear that global tension, especially the ongoing one, are not as distant as they may seem. The effects are already being felt across the globe, including Africa economies and within our everyday life. So the responsibility now lies not just with the leaders, but with all of us. And that's it. We need to stay informed and ask questions and understand how global events shape our local realities. And that's a show for you today. That's what we have for you on Across Borders today. Until next time, we'll see you again. My name is Grace Komalafe. Do not forget to follow us via our social media platforms at Sook News TV. On behalf of the Across Borders team, we are saying thank you for joining us and have a great day.